Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to give you kind of a brief introduction into careers in accounting. So I want to start off by simply talking first about the demand for accountants. Accountants are just one of those jobs where there is always high demand. And I usually say, avoid words like this, always. But in this case, accounting really is one of those things where the demand doesn't really go down. And there's numerous reasons for that, but I'll highlight some of the big ones for you here. First of all, every company needs them, right? Every company has to manage its finances if it's going to stay in business anyway. And typically, you're going to need an accountant to take care of that. Regulation requires them. So Reg SX is the regulation from the SEC that dictates companies' financial reports every year. And that dictates that companies' financial reports must be audited by an independent accountant. So by regulation, every publicly traded company out there actually has to have an accountant, an independent accountant, not hired by the company, who will audit their financial statements for them. Sarbanes-Oxley Act, also commonly known as SOX. So if you ever hear accounting people talk about SOX, they're not talking about what goes on their feet. They're talking about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. This one actually requires independent accountants to sign off on the company's internal controls over their financial reporting, basically the safeguards that they have in place to make sure that their financial reports are going to be accurate. So two different regulations, both requiring an independent accountant to a company to essentially sign off on aspects of the company before they're able to issue their financial statements to investors. Speaking of investors, the part of the reason accountants are always in demand is, well, they're part of the protections that are in place over companies to protect investors. Now, you can argue one way or another of whether or not a capital market would self-regulate if you took the accountants out of the equation, so forth and so on. That's not really what's up for debate here. The fact is, companies are known for committing fraudulent acts. There's plenty of cases of fraud in the history of companies. And accountants, specifically the independent accountants that work as public accountants or certified public accountants, CPAs, they're there to essentially try to keep companies in check. They're there to audit the financial statements, to audit the internal controls, the regulation I just talked about, and to essentially make sure that when financial information about a company gets to investors, that investors can rely on that information for financial decision-making purposes. And then finally, their jobs are evolving with emerging technology. And this is one really big reason accountants stay in demand is, accounting, some people may have this stereotypical image of, hey, the accountant is this boring person that sits in a corner and does calculations and blah, 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 blah. And frankly, in today's world, that's just not true. Accountants are actually on the cutting edge of technology. Things like artificial intelligence, things like robotic process automation, things like blockchain, drones, et cetera, et cetera. All of this stuff is actually heavily integrated or getting integrated into the world of accounting. And so, the fact is the job is not static. The job evolves with the times, and therefore a new blood is always needed, essentially, to kind of fill those roles. New blood that's familiar with the new tech and so forth and so on. So accountants are really always in high demand. Now, let's talk about the careers themselves. Your common accounting career options include the ones listed here. And really, it's kind of the ones above the line that I have right now, and then this kind of specialty below the line is just kind of fun to talk about. But the big one is the one that I start off with here, and that's your public accountants. So these are basically the accountants that I mentioned before, the certified public accountants, the CPAs. They provide your auditing, tax, and consulting services for companies, okay? So the auditors are there to protect the investors, make sure the financial statements and the controls over those statements are in good shape. The tax accountants are there to basically help make sure that the taxes are all done correctly, and the government gets its share and the company saves as much as it can, and everybody's happy in that relationship. And then, of course, the consulting services are there to, help companies grow and get the information that they may not have in-house. So that's kind of what your public accountants do. These are usually firms of accountants. These aren't always individuals. I mean, plenty of individuals are out there, probably more often in the tax space and in the consulting space than in the auditing space. When it comes to, say, the auditing side of things, it's usually giant firms that are doing these services. Private accountants. So private accountants is what you think about when you think about an accountant in the traditional sense. These are the people that actually sit in the company and do the company's books, right? So we'll call them the financial accountants, okay? Work for the company. I put accounts instead of accountants. They work for the company. They do the company's books. They process the company's transactions, so forth and so on. But accountants are not just at the staff level. You have accountants in managerial and executive positions. So managerial and executive accountants. So you're going to have accounting staff, yes, that will do the books and the typical transactions, but you are going to have accounting managers. You're going to have a controller. You're going to have a CFO. You're going to have a treasurer, right? And those are just the basics. And you may have multiple assistant or other duplicative positions of this nature, depending on the size of a company. So accounting careers aren't just staff level careers. They actually move into high positions in the company, typically capping out at, say, the CFO level. Your private accountants also include your internal auditors. Now, you may notice that I said auditors is part of public accounting. And that is true. That's your independent auditors are part of public accounting, but you might actually hire your own auditors inside your own company to help audit things on the inside. They're there, one, to kind of keep things in line before that independent auditor gets there to check everything. Two, they're there to provide value add to the company. They're there to provide consulting services. They're there to help make operational decisions, so forth and so on. So that's kind of your private accountants. It's people that work for the company in the field of accounting. And it's staff level, it's management level, it's executive level, it's the whole way. All right, government accountants. Well, this is exactly what it sounds like. These are the accountants that do governmental accounting. Governmental accounting is different than company accounting. It's different than corporate accounting. And so there's not really much to say here other than you're going to have government accountants at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. You've got government accountants at every single level of government, and they're needed because it's a special skill set. And then this last one that I said isn't not necessarily one of the mainstream ones, but it's one of the more interesting ones, forensic accountants. Think of these as your accounting detectives. They're the ones that do investigations, specifically having to do with theft or fraud, okay? That's what these guys do. They are trained in basically analyzing transactions, finding transactions that don't look right, finding information stored in the company that doesn't look right, and essentially weeding out whether or not any theft or fraudulent activity has taken place. This is a very special field. It requires a special skill set. It's also one of the more fun aspects of accounting. So there you have it. 4 main kind of career tracks in accounting, all with their own numerous sub-tracks. And then I already told you about all the different demand for accountants. You can see kind of the big picture here of why accounting is just kind of one of these things that it'll never go away, and it's always in increasing demand. All righty, that's it for this one. Hope you found it interesting, and I hope you join me for another video.